No time to color, or maybe it's just not your thing? Today I'm sharing an easy watercolor stamping technique in two different ways featuring Tonic Studios Heartfelt Corsage. Hey guys, it's Amber from Notable Ink. If this is your first time here, welcome, and if you like what you see, I'd love it if you subscribe. This is the brand new Tonic Studios Heartfelt Corsage Stamp and Die Bundle. This does come only as a bundle with the stamp and coordinating dies, and this is inspired by Maria Willis. Super talented. I love how she colors, and I think that this floral is just gorgeous. So I'm going to be focusing on this stamp set today, but I'm also going to use a stamp from the Happy Mail envelope stamp set. I'll share a custom envelope later in the video. Each of the stamps and dies from this release come in a binder pouch, and they coordinate perfectly with the A5 ring binder that you see in the top left-hand corner there. This video is part of a blog hop, so follow my blog link down below for a chance to win a $100 gift card. So I have the large corsage from Heartfelt Corsage loaded in my mini Misty, and I have my Daniel Smith watercolors here. And I've done this watercolor stamping technique before. I recently did it in another video where I was just having a terrible crafting day. Like literally nothing was working out for me. I started a card 3 times. All 3 of them ended up in the bin. That video will actually come out later, so you will get to see that. But this watercolor stamping technique kind of brought my mojo back and kind of got me reorganized, because it doesn't take much effort at all, not a lot of skill, and it's really easy to do for a super effective look. So I have a piece of Saunders Waterford High White cold press watercolor paper. It's cut to A2 size, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I've lightly misted my watercolor pans with water, and I have a damp brush, and I'm just picking up a little bit of paint. I'm using new gamboge, which is a warm yellow, and also PYRROL Scarlet, which is a cool red. And I'm just putting the paint directly onto the stamp set. Now, of course, watercolors are water soluble, so this isn't going to stain your stamp set. By the end of me stamping this, it is going to look like a hot mess, but I just ran it under the sink in the just in some cool water, and it all comes right off, no problems at all. So I'm just adding a little bit of the new gamboge to the center of the PYRROL Scarlet flowers, and then I'm going to use sap green for all of the leaves and the stems. So I do end up stamping this twice, and what's nice about this, if you are stamping this multiple times, is it's actually even easier to do it a second time because you already have the colors laid down. It can be a little challenging with a clear stamp to see what you're inking up. If you ink up a flower in the wrong color and you wanted to switch it, you just wipe it off and just pick a different color, not unlike your regular inks. And I love how this looks. I love how the colors lightly blend together where they intersect. And here you can see that I have 2 of them. I'm going to put one aside because I wanted to actually now watercolor this one. I was glad that I had 2 just in case I made a mistake. It's a little bit of a comfort zone there, having an extra one on standby. But it won't be necessary because this does turn out really well. So I have a little bit of the PYRROL Scarlet, and I was thinking that I was going to paint with the watercolor. It turns out I don't need that at all. So I start with a little bit of the watercolor, and it's a little too much color for me, so I just wet my brush. For the rest of this piece, I'll actually just use a wet brush and just take it right up to the edge of the watercolor stamping that we did and draw that color out. The slightly damp brush will activate the colors beautifully, and you can just draw out the pigments and color the whole piece this way. It kind of had me thinking about, like, if you did a gift set of these cards, I kind of wondered how long these pigments you'd be able to reactivate them. So let's say you stamped a bunch of these and you gave them as a gift set and said, you know, as part of the gift that they could watercolor these, just draw out the colors with a damp brush. I was kind of wondering how long that would actually be effective. I don't know. I'll have to test it. If you guys know, let me know in the comments down below. So I'm just going to use the damp brush, and I'm using, that's a number 4 round brush. These brushes are from Wonder Forest. They have a nice snap to them. They're synthetic, and I really do like them. I use them almost exclusively. They're my most used brushes, I would say. The sap green was a little bit lighter, and for some of those leaves where there was a large expanse of white space, I wanted to add a little bit more pigment for color variation. So I took a little bit of the sap green directly from the pan and added that just to get a little more shadow in those areas where there was a lot of white space. So here you can see the two different versions. Looking at them here, I wanted to have a little more depth of color to the yellow flowers and a little bit more shadow to the PYRROL Scarlet flowers. So I'm adding just a touch more color to those, really just tapping super lightly at the base of the petals to get a little more shadow and variation in the color there. So of course they need some splatter, so I just used the leftover paint and splattered both of the cards with yellow and green only. I didn't do any red. I felt like the cards had enough red on them. So I'm just clean up my glass mat. Underneath this glass mat I have an Altenew stamping mat. I get a lot of questions about that. The pattern isn't actually on the glass mat itself, just the grid pattern is. So I have one of these stamps from the Heartfelt Corsage stamp set, and I'm just going to stamp that twice. Anytime I'm stamping on watercolor paper, I do stamp it twice because of the texture of the paper. And I used a sub-sentiment as well. And then to finish off the cards, I'll use some Nouveau drops in ebony. Now, I never take these directly to my cards because I ruined quite a few cards that way. So I just make a whole bunch of them on that scrap of craft mat that you see there, and then I store them in this little dish, and then I'll just glue them on with a bit of the Nouveau Deluxe adhesive. And it has a really nice fine point, so it goes on quite well. Here are the finished cards, and I can't decide which one I like better. You'll have to let me know down below which one you prefer. So I thought I would make a slimline card, a little bit of a modified dimension though. So normally I would do a slimline card as 3.5 by 8.5, but I actually really like 3.5 by 7 inches better. It's just shorter, but I really like the narrow format of it, and I thought that would be perfect for this stamp, which is also from Heartfelt Corsage. So this time around I'm switching up the color scheme. I'm using Quin Purple, which is, I guess I would consider this a warm purple, and I'm also using Viridian, which is a cool toned green, almost leaning towards teal. So I decided I would try out this watercolor stamping with a sentiment, a scripty sentiment no less, and I think you can do this if you use less water than what I had on my brush. You really want to make sure that you dry your brush quite a bit before you do this. Obviously, I can't take this and lift this off the card at this point. I am going to take a little bit of the pigment off of that Y just to dry it up a little. And then I'll go ahead and re-ink up the stamp with a pigment ink. So this is Versavine Clair in Twilight, which is a navy blue. And I'll stamp that twice. So you'll get a little bit of that watercolor feel underneath the sentiment, but it's going to be more legible with the pigment ink stamped on top. And then I'll use a sub-sentiment, and that time I just stamped it in the Twilight ink. Of course, we need to add some splatter, and so this is a really clean and simple card that comes together super quickly. I used the We Are Memory Keepers 123 punch board and watercolor paper to make this envelope, and the measurements were a little off. I had to cut off 2 of the corners because they were just a little bit off. I find if you use the envelope generator app that they have, the We Are Memory Keepers envelope generator app, you get better measurements with that. So just keep that in mind if you make this. Now, if you're going to send this envelope in the mail, you'll need to seal it with like a microglaze from Ranger or something like that, or either put it in a clear plastic envelope to mail, because again, you can reactivate those watercolors if it were to get wet. You'll have to let me know what you think of this easy watercolor stamping technique down below, and which one is your favorite, the one with the extra color or just the outline alone. And be sure to follow my blog post link down below for tons of inspiration along the hop. Leave comments along the hop so that you can enter to win the $100 or £100 gift card to Shop Tonic. Thanks so much for joining me today. If this was your first time here and you haven't subscribed already, I'd love it if you would. I'll see you next time with more inspiration.